She barked the order before I could blink. "Sir, step back from the door and place your hands behind your head." Except she wasn't a cop. Her vest said Cedar Ridge Enforcement Division, which doesn't exist in any jurisdiction I've ever lived in. And the patch on her shoulder? It was upside down. Amateur hour, dressed up like Federal Thunder. I didn't move, not yet. "You sent unlicensed private security to execute a no-warrant entry on federal land," I said flatly. "This house sits on a military easement. You just committed a felony. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back." Her face didn't register it right away. The others, 3 men, all decked out in tactical cosplay, glanced at each other. One of them reached for his radio. I almost laughed. That channel wouldn't work here. I built the mesh net that scrambles unauthorized devices. They were already isolated. Name's Tyler Monroe. I don't swing first, but I do finish what others are too arrogant to understand they started. Ex-Air Force Logistics, now cybersecurity compliance lead for a federal defense contractor. I know every statute they just violated, and I've got 6 cameras recording every frame. But this story, it's not about me. It's about her, my wife, Lana. She didn't come to the door, thank God. The only reason this didn't end in blood is because she stayed upstairs when the breach call came in. Maybe it was the smell of ozone on the gear. Maybe it was the angle of their hands, too much like that checkpoint in Kandahar. Either way, if she'd been the one answering, someone would have gone home in a body bag, or not gone home at all. And that's what Patricia Ellings knew when she sent them. This wasn't about fines. It wasn't about paint violations or non-standard yard displays. This was about fear, control, and the one thing Patricia couldn't control anymore, the mural. It's a hand-painted flag that spans our garage, done in fading cobalt and crimson with a golden K9 unit badge ghosted in the center. Lana painted it after Coda, her service dog, was killed in a blast clearing a school in Wardak province. Took her 4 days. Said it was the only time since she came home that her hands didn't shake. Patricia said it was too militant. Said it violated community tone. Said it made guests uncomfortable. What she didn't say, but made sure we heard, was that it made her look weak. She likes shiny mailboxes and power she didn't earn. Lana's mural? That was strength with scars. We got our first citation within 72 hours of moving in. The second came when Coda's replacement barked twice in the yard. The third accused us of storing military equipment on private property, because I had a surplus ammo can in the garage with Lana's medals inside. But it was this stunt, the fake SWAT, that crossed a line no HOA has a right to draw. They thought we'd panic, that we'd crumble under intimidation and disappear into compliance. They forgot who they were dealing with. The fake officer kept her hand on her belt. Her thumb twitched, unsure whether to reach for a badge that didn't exist or a weapon she wasn't licensed to carry. I stepped slowly between her and the door. Behind me, my ring cam fed everything straight to cloud backup, plus 3 hidden feeds running off a separate network. There were ways to win this clean, and I was already 4 steps into mine. But even then, I wasn't thinking about the strategy. I was thinking about Lana, about the mural, about the time she stood in our backyard at 2 a.m., paint still drying on her fingers, whispering Coda's name into the quiet. She lost everything once already, and I'll be damned if I let a petty tyrant in a pantsuit take what little she's rebuilt. Where are you watching from? Because the HOA didn't just send a warning, they sent a threat to a soldier's home, and they're about to find out what happens when you weaponize peace against someone who knows the cost of war. By the time the sheriff's cruiser pulled into the cul-de-sac, the fake SWAT team was already packing up. No sirens, no guns drawn, just the quiet shuffle of cowards realizing they'd miscalculated. I didn't bother waving them down. I let the sheriff come to me. Deputy Green stepped out with a clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the street like he'd seen this play out before. Maybe he had. This neighborhood had a reputation. Cedar Ridge Estates was as polished as it was petty. The kind of place where power came in petty forms. Font size on signs, mailbox uniformity, lawn height, and who could break who behind the scenes. "What exactly happened here?" he asked, voice even. They called in a fabricated welfare check. Sent a private security firm dressed like a raid team. No jurisdiction, no legal footing, and no authorization for forced entry. I nodded toward my camera. Everything's time-stamped. You'll get the footage. He didn't look surprised. And the HOA? He asked, already knowing the answer. Patricia Ellings, president. She's been escalating since day one. I hesitated. This wasn't about a violation. This was a message. He scribbled something on the form and closed the clipboard. We'll follow up. I knew what that meant, filed, maybe passed along, but nothing would happen unless someone higher up got involved. Patricia had done this before. She knew exactly how far to push before it became prosecutable. This time, though, she pushed too far. Inside, Lana sat at the dining table, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't sipped from. She wasn't shaking, but her shoulders were tight, like she hadn't exhaled since the knock on the door. Heard anything? She asked. Deputy was polite. We'll get the usual runaround. Her eyes flicked to the mural through the front window. It's still there. It's not going anywhere. That night, I went through every violation letter we'd received since moving in. There were 14. 14 citations in just under 3 months. Mural, flag angle, decorative stones, dog noise, unapproved lighting, a folded American flag in our windowsill labeled external visual obstruction. I laid them out on the living room floor, cross-referencing dates and incidents. Some came before the violations had even been written. Some overlapped with weekends, when HOA enforcement was supposedly off duty. Others cited rules that didn't exist in the bylaws, and some were personal. One in particular struck me. It mentioned community concerns regarding intimidating decor. That was the week Lana had added the K9 unit badge to the mural. That badge wasn't in the original version. She painted it the day she visited Coda's memorial brick at the base of the Virginia War Dog Monument. Came home quiet, painted it in the dark with a headlamp on. That letter wasn't about a code. It was about control. I scanned the HOA website. Patricia's name appeared everywhere. Board president, event chair, neighborhood harmony coordinator, whatever that meant. I clicked through meeting minutes, archived PDF bylaws, and enforcement policies. Most of it was boilerplate, but then I saw it, an entry labeled Resolution 23B. Resolution 23B wasn't on the main list. It was buried in a subfolder labeled Provisional Measures. No voting record, no member sign-offs, but it gave the president, Patricia, temporary authority to contract third-party security in the interest of preserving neighborhood order. There was no expiration date, no required board approval. That was it. That was her cover. She made herself judge, jury, and rent-a-sheriff, and no one else on the board had signed it. I cross-checked the contractor name from the fake SWAT team, Civic Shield, LLC. Their website was basic. Their address was a mailbox at a strip mall 2 towns over. And their state license expired 9 months ago. That's when the shape of this thing started to come into focus. Patricia wasn't just weaponizing the HOA. She was freelancing law enforcement through unlicensed channels. Worse, she was doing it under the illusion of community consensus. That's what she'd been counting on, that no one would look deeper, that we'd move out, fold, or snap, and give her a reason to bury us legally. But I didn't snap. I started documenting. By morning, I'd outlined a sequence chart of all citations, each connected to Lana's actions, mural additions, vet appointments, even therapy sessions. Patricia was watching us more closely than we realized. I didn't tell Lana everything yet, not about the expired license, not about the provisional authority clause, not even about Civic Shield. She didn't need more pressure in her chest, not yet. But I knew now, this wasn't just personal, this was illegal. Cedar Ridge wasn't just a battlefield for power-tripping retirees. It was a stage, and Patricia had been playing God while the rest of the board either looked away or bowed down. But there was one man who hadn't bowed yet, Darren Kellerman, treasurer. I'd seen the way his eyes faltered during the last meeting, the way his pen hovered above the paper while the others signed off on another violation. He knew something, and if I played it right, he might be the first crack in Patricia's perfect little empire. The next HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse, A beige building that looked like a dentist's waiting room with a podium. I showed up 15 minutes early and took the back corner seat, just behind the table of complimentary fruit punch and stale cookies no one ever touched. Darren Kellerman was already there, setting up the attendance sign-in. He looked like someone who ironed his socks, gray polo, name tag clipped exactly center, clipboard held like a shield. When I stepped forward and signed my name, his eyes flicked to the list, then up to me. A pause. Just a half second too long. Then he cleared his throat and handed me a copy of the agenda. "Evening, mister. Monroe," he said. Voice steady, but his hand trembled slightly as he adjusted the stack of handouts. "Evening," I replied, watching him more closely now. Patricia strutted in 5 minutes later, flanked by 2 board members and holding a custom-printed folder embossed with her initials. She didn't look at me, but her lips curled when she saw I'd shown up. That smug little twist, the look of someone who thinks they already know the outcome. She called the meeting to order and launched into a report about landscaping expenditures and upcoming paint audits, all delivered in that saccharine tone of weaponized professionalism. It was all standard HOA fluff until she reached the final item. "Lastly, we've received several concerns about a certain residence displaying paramilitary iconography that may be triggering to guests and children," she said, eyes still not meeting mine. "We're initiating a formal review to determine if emergency safety measures must be taken." Darren didn't move. He didn't nod. He didn't even look at her. His jaw tightened, but he stayed silent as the vote passed 3-0. I waited until the meeting adjourned, then made my move. Darren was gathering his things near the exit when I stepped beside him. "You didn't vote." He stiffened. I abstained. "Why?" He didn't answer. Just pulled his glasses off and wiped them with the edge of his polo, even though they were spotless. I let the silence stretch a beat too long. "I know about Civic Shield," I said quietly. His hand froze. "I know their license expired. I know Resolution 23B was never ratified. And I know Patricia bypassed board approval." He looked at me then, eyes rimmed red, like he hadn't slept in days. "You don't understand the pressure she puts on us. The politics, the intimidation. I do. That's why I'm not walking away. You think what happened at my house was just a mistake? My wife nearly pulled a weapon. She's military. That fake SWAT stunt could have gotten someone killed." "I didn't approve it," he muttered. "I didn't even know she'd activated that clause until the contractor showed up in our notes. By then, she told us it was resolved." "You've seen the way she targets people," I said. "How long have you been letting it happen?" That got him. His face twitched, guilt, shame, maybe both. "She used to be reasonable," he said after a long moment. "At first it was just enforcing the rules. Then she got elected president again, started talking about optics, about protecting the neighborhood's aesthetic integrity. She said if we didn't preserve property values, no one else would." I leaned in. "You know what she's doing is illegal. You know this isn't about property values anymore." He nodded, barely. "I can't be the only one pushing back," I said. "If I go this alone, she'll spin it as a personal grudge. But if someone from inside the board stands up—" "You want me to be your whistleblower," he interrupted. "You want me to put my name on the line." "I want you to sleep at night," I said. He looked down at the agenda in his hand, the printed logo of Cedar Ridge glinting under the fluorescent lights. His fingers tightened until the page crinkled. "She's going to ruin you," he whispered. "You know that, right? She'll find a way. Not if we make the first move." He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. And when he finally left the building, he walked past Patricia without a word. No head nod, no fake smile, nothing. Later that night, I found a plain white envelope on my porch. No return address, just a post-it stuck to the front that read, "She's been doing this longer than you think." Inside were 3 things. A printed email thread between Patricia and Civic Shield dated 3 months prior, before any board vote had even mentioned security. A copy of the HOA's annual budget with a handwritten note, "Security line item moved without approval," and a photo. Black and white. Grainy. Patricia shaking hands with a man wearing the same patch as the officer who tried to enter my house. I didn't need a confession anymore. Patricia didn't slow down after the fake SWAT stunt. She doubled down. 2 days after the envelope arrived, we got a new citation, this time for excessive use of non-standard outdoor lighting. The flag lights Lana installed last month to gently illuminate the mural at night had been on every evening since we moved in. Suddenly, they were a threat to neighborhood ambiance. The letter was hand-delivered, no signature, no time, stamp. Just a warning and a threat of escalating fines. I checked the bylaw archive again. There wasn't a single clause about lighting intensity. Only vague language about neighborly decorum. It wasn't enforcement. It was harassment. Lana didn't say anything when I showed her the notice. She didn't have to. The way she quietly unplugged the lights before sunrise said everything. This war wasn't just exhausting her. It was pulling her back into a mindset she'd fought to escape. I needed to move faster. That afternoon, I made an appointment under a different name and drove 2 towns over to the listed office of Civic Shield, LLC, the security firm Patricia had used for her pretend raid. The address turned out to be a strip mall with a vape shop on one end and a payday loan place on the other. Suite 103 was a locked glass door with no company signage, just a paper taped inside that read, "By appointment only." I knocked twice, no answer. So I took a photo of the door, the unit number, and the empty parking space out front, then turned back toward my car. That's when I noticed the man leaning against the dumpster a few feet away, watching me over the top of his cigarette. "You looking for Greg?" he asked. I played dumb. "Greg? Owner of that fake-ass company," he said, exhaling smoke. "Yeah, he's never here. Just pays rent to keep his mail somewhere official. Last time I saw him, he was arguing with some woman in a blue Audi about liability or whatever. Said she never paid him in full." My pulse quickened. "What did she look like?" He squinted. Blonde, expensive nails. Had that "you work for me" attitude. You know the type. I showed him a photo of Patricia from the HOA board page. "That's her," he said instantly. "You should have seen the way she talked to him. Like he was her dog and forgot how to sit." That was all I needed. I thanked him, slipped him $20, and got out of there. On the drive back, I called an old contact, Mira Devlin, a state licensing analyst I used to work with during my DOD compliance audits. We weren't close, but I knew Mira cared more about legal order than politics. I didn't mention the HOA. I just told her I had a concern about a security contractor operating under expired licensure and possibly impersonating law enforcement. "Send me the name and what you've got," she said. "But if this is a vendetta thing, Tyler..." "It's not," I cut in. "This is real. There was a tactical breach attempt on private property last week by men wearing falsified agency gear. One of them had his finger near the trigger guard, silence on the other end. I'll look into it," she said. By the time I pulled into the driveway, a new letter was waiting in the mailbox. This one bore Patricia's actual signature. It was an intent to fine notice citing violation of community harmony, aggressive dog behavior, and nonconformity of displayed. Media. She'd added a clause. Failure to comply within 10 days would result in escalation to civil intervention. Civil intervention. She wasn't just bluffing anymore. She was building a paper trail that made us look dangerous, unstable, justified for further containment. I scanned the letter, filed it digitally, and walked around to the backyard where Lana sat beneath the mural, silent as the setting sun bathed the flag in gold. "She's escalating," I said. Lana didn't move. "You don't have to protect me from this." "Yes, I do," I said, "because it's not about you anymore. It's about the next veteran who moves in, the next widow who paints a memory instead of putting it in a drawer." She finally turned toward me. "You think she's that calculated?" "I think she's that afraid. Of anything that reminds her she didn't earn her authority." That night, I sat at my desk and began writing a summary report of everything I had. The envelope, the citations, the fake firm, the strip mall office, the expired license, the witness testimony, and the personal targeting patterns. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I didn't hit send, not yet, because there was one more piece I needed. I needed Patricia's voice on record. I needed her to say the quiet part out loud. I didn't have to wait long for Patricia to speak. 2 days after the civil intervention notice, she made the mistake of calling me directly. Maybe she thought it was her last chance to put me in check, Or maybe she just couldn't resist watching the knife twist. The number came up as private. I let it ring twice, hit record on my secondary phone, then answered. Mr. Monroe, she began, cool and clipped. I'm calling to offer you a final opportunity for cooperation. We'd prefer not to escalate things any further. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. Cooperation, I repeated. Yes, you've made your position clear. But this is about more than personal pride. You and your wife have become disruptive to the community. She didn't realize she was giving me everything I needed. Define disruptive. There have been concerns, she said. Guests have been startled, children frightened. The mural sends a message that some consider hostile. Military aggression is not the identity we wish to project here. And the fake SWAT team? I asked, voice steady. What message did that send? She paused, then too quickly replied, No one sent a SWAT team. We simply hired security professionals to check on a potentially volatile situation. Your wife has military trauma, correct? We were told there was shouting, possible violence. You fabricated the report, I said. You staged a threat. I acted within provisional authority granted to the board, she snapped, her calm veneer slipping. And I will do so again if I believe safety is at stake. That was it. That last line was what I needed. Clear abuse of power, justification through fabricated fear. I ended the call without another word and uploaded the audio to an encrypted drive. Now the outside intervention wasn't just strategy. It was imminent. Mira from the licensing board called me back an hour later. You were right, she said. Civic Shield's license expired last October. Not only that, they were fined last year for impersonation violations in another county. And if this HOA president used them under the impression they had active status, that's one thing. But if she knew, I said. I have voice proof. I also have evidence she moved budget line items without board approval. Mira exhaled slowly. Okay, then this just moved from administrative inquiry to criminal investigation. She told me to forward everything I had to her official case email. She also warned me to prepare for resistance. HOA boards, especially ones like Patricia's, rarely crumble without a fight. But if even half of what I claimed could be verified, the licensing board would launch a formal complaint and notify local law enforcement. It was the first official validation I'd heard in weeks. After I hung up, I walked outside, past the driveway, and down the sidewalk that led to the community's walking trail. That trail passed directly behind Darren Kellerman's house. I didn't knock, just waited until I saw him on his back patio, watering a tray of succulents like they might report him for neglect if he didn't. He noticed me, hesitated, then waved me over. She called you, didn't she? He said before I even spoke. I nodded. I recorded it. She admitted to everything. He didn't look surprised, just tired, the kind of tired that lived in the spine. You want to know why I stayed quiet so long? He said. No, I replied. I want to know if you're done staying quiet. He set down the watering can and wiped his hands on his pants. When I joined the board, it was just about keeping the place clean. Organized, but Patricia made it something else. She started tracking people, profiling them. I raised an eyebrow. Profiling? Veterans, single mothers, renters, anyone who didn't fit the aesthetic. She keeps a folder, real files, printed photos, notes, where. He looked toward his house. In her home office? But you'll never get in there. I didn't need to, not yet. She's going to face a licensing investigation, I said. Possibly criminal. I've already submitted the documents and the call recording. Darren sat down slowly, like gravity had gotten heavier. I'll testify, he said. If it comes to that. I looked at him, really looked. The crispness he always wore at meetings, the scripted professionalism, it was still there. But now it looked like armor, dented in all the places he couldn't cover anymore. You're doing the right thing, I said. No, he corrected me. I'm finally admitting I didn't before. As I walked back home, I noticed something different. Neighbors were out, watching, not talking, not approaching, but aware. Something had shifted. The silence that protected Patricia for so long was cracking. Now it was time to prepare the full report. Not just the one for the licensing board, but one for the sheriff, the county oversight committee, and the local press. Because what Patricia feared most wasn't just being caught. 2 nights later, Lana woke up screaming. She hadn't done that in months, not since before the mural, not since she started sleeping under the soft wash of those flag lights she painted herself. But the lights were gone now, unplugged after Patricia's latest citation. And whatever fragile boundary they offered between memory and rest had vanished with them. I was out of bed in an instant, arms around her, grounding her back in the present. Her chest heaved like her lungs couldn't find air, her fists clenched so tightly the bones trembled beneath her skin. "Kandahar," she whispered, voice hoarse. "The checkpoint. Same stance, same tone. They didn't move like cops, they moved like mercs." "I know," I said, "and we've got them now." But it didn't matter in that moment because the damage was already done. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. Neither did I. By morning, she was sitting under the mural again, her back to the wall, staring out at nothing. The sky was a slow gray crawl, the kind of heavy overcast that pressed on your shoulders. I brought her coffee. She didn't touch it. "You're not wrong to be angry," I told her. "This isn't paranoia. It's a pattern. She wants me erased," Lana said quietly. "That mural is the last piece of me that doesn't flinch. And she wants it gone." I crouched beside her. "She's about to find out what it means to pick the wrong kind of war." I spent the day compiling everything, the full report, audio from the call, photos of Civic Shield's office, or lack of it, the expired license confirmation from Mira, screenshots of the budget misallocation Darren had flagged, every violation letter we'd received since moving in, cross-referenced with public bylaws, a full log of our security footage, including timestamps from the fake SWAT arrival and departure, and finally, a written summary signed by Darren, verifying Patricia had not disclosed the Civic Shield hire to the board, had concealed the expired license when confronted, and had used safety as a cover for targeted harassment. I wrote it like I used to write ops reports, clear, cold, bulletproof. When I finished, I sent 3 emails, one to Mira at the licensing board, one to a contact at the sheriff's internal review division, and the third to a reporter named Elena Graves, who ran a weekly investigative column in the local paper. We weren't friends, but I knew her work. She'd covered everything from school board corruption to shady land use lawsuits. If there was a story here, and there was, she'd find it. Then I backed up every file twice, once on a secure drive, and once in a dead-drop cloud folder only I could access. That evening, I walked the trail behind the neighborhood. Slow, steady. Not for exercise, for eyes. Sure enough, I saw them. Neighbors on their porches, behind windows, hovering near mailboxes a little longer than necessary, watching me, whispering. I wasn't just the mural guy anymore. I was something else now. That's when I saw Carol. She lived 3 houses down, widowed, quiet, never attended HOA meetings, always smiled but never spoke much. She stepped out from behind her garden gate as I passed. "She's been after me too," Carol said. No introduction, no explanation. I stopped. She said my wind chimes were disruptive, that they triggered migraines for some of the sensitive residents. I stopped hanging them after the second warning. Her voice tightened. "My husband bought me those chimes on our last vacation before his diagnosis." I nodded once. "You're not alone." She looked down. "I know." That was the moment I understood. We weren't just building a legal case. We were igniting something older, a collective exhaustion with silence. When I got back to the house, Lana was painting again. A second badge had appeared on the mural, fainter than the first, almost a ghost within the flag's folds. I didn't ask who it was for. I just sat with her while she finished. The next morning, my inbox lit up. Mira had forwarded my report to the state attorney's office. They'd initiated a formal investigation into Patricia's use of Civic Shield. The sheriff's department followed up, requesting a full interview. And Elena? She responded with one sentence. "I want to talk tonight. I don't publish rumors. I publish proof." The pressure was finally moving outward, no longer trapped in our walls. But I wasn't done. Because while Patricia had built her fortress on image and fear, she'd underestimated the weight of truth. And now the foundation was cracking. The meeting with Elena Graves took place in the most neutral place I could think of, a diner on the edge of town, the kind with laminated menus, lukewarm coffee, and a soundtrack of forks clinking against ceramic, the kind of place where nobody cared who you were as long as you tipped. She slid into the booth across from me, a digital recorder already in hand. Early 40s, jeans, notepad, eyes that missed nothing. No fake smiles, no unnecessary pleasantries. "You're Tyler Monroe," she said, more statement than greeting. I nodded. "You got the files?" "All of them. Twice. And I verified the licensure violations and the budget discrepancy already." Mira confirmed. She leaned forward. "What I want now is context, motive. Why would a neighborhood HOA president risk impersonating law enforcement?" I slid a folder across the table. Not digital, printed, one copy. Inside, Darren Kellerman's signed statement, a transcript of Patricia's call, and the time-stamped sequence of events surrounding the Civic Shield incident. "She didn't just impersonate authority," I said. "She outsourced fear. She weaponized the illusion of legality to maintain control. She targeting you specifically?" "Yes. But we're not the only ones." Elena opened the folder and scanned a few lines. Then, "I need a source from the board." "You'll get one. Not anonymous," she added. "I don't print shadows." I nodded slowly. "He's ready. But you'll have to see it in his face before he says it." Later that night, I met Darren at the maintenance shed behind the community pool, a quiet, unused space, no cameras, no foot traffic. He was already waiting when I arrived, slouched on a plastic bench, hands buried in his jacket pockets. "I never thought it would come to this," he said. "She's made sure it has," I replied, "and we don't get a second chance to get this right." I handed him the same printed file I gave Elena. "You're the only one who can verify these pieces. Your signature confirms the board didn't approve Civic Shield, that the Resolution 23B clause was misused, that the budget was altered after the fiscal vote." Darren took the folder, stared at the front page for a long time, then flipped it open. "Do you know what she told me when I first joined the board?" he said, not looking up. "We're not managing a community, we're protecting an investment." I didn't understand what she meant at first. I thought she was talking about curb appeal, neighborhood pride. His jaw clenched. But what she really meant was conformity, erasure, silence. "She's still bluffing like she holds the cards," I said. "But she doesn't know we've already played ours." He closed the folder, stood, and looked me in the eye. "I'll talk to the reporter. I'll go on record." The next afternoon, Elena met Darren face to face. She asked him 3 questions. He answered all of them with steady hands. Yes, Patricia authorized Civic Shield without approval. Yes, she knew their license was expired. Yes, she personally altered the HOA's budget report to cover the payments. Elena didn't flinch, didn't blink. She just clicked off her recorder and said, "That's enough for now." Within 24 hours, her editor greenlit the story. That same night, I received a copy of the official complaint from the Department of Regulatory Oversight. They were launching a full audit of Patricia's financial decisions as HOA president, including use of unlicensed contractors. Mira sent me a short note alongside the attachment. "You lit the match. Now stand clear of the smoke." But I didn't want to stand clear. I wanted to breathe it in. I wanted to be there when Patricia watched the machine she built begin to fold in on itself. Still, I knew we couldn't move carelessly. Lana stayed quiet through most of it. Not because she wasn't angry, because she was saving her strength. I watched her paint again that night, a 3rd badge. This one belonged to a handler she'd trained in Germany, young, green, killed in a roadside bombing 3 days before rotation. She didn't tell me the name. I didn't ask. I just watched the mural grow stronger, even as Patricia tried to weaken it. By week's end, we knew it was time. Darren would accompany Elena to the next HOA meeting, public, recorded, and held in the clubhouse like always. Patricia wouldn't see it coming. She'd think it was another routine vote, another evening of compliance and applause. She wouldn't know she was walking into her own reckoning. And this time, the witnesses wouldn't stay silent. I woke before sunrise the day of the meeting, not from a nightmare, not from noise, just from something deeper, older. a quiet alertness in the chest, the kind I used to feel before deployment briefings. You don't panic. You prepare. The air was damp, thick with pre-storm tension. Clouds stacked low over Cedar Ridge like a ceiling ready to fall. I stood outside, hands in my jacket, staring at the mural as the early light caught the brushstrokes. The colors had darkened over time, weathered but proud. 3 badges now, each one more defiant than the last. Inside, Lana brewed coffee and packed a manila envelope. She didn't need to ask if I was ready. She saw it in the way I moved, precise, methodical. Every item we needed was accounted for: hard copies, digital backups, drive redundancies. Patricia would never see the whole board until the checkmate was announced. The final phase wasn't confrontation, it was preparation. The kind of groundwork that made sure once we went public, there would be no walking it back, no denials, no PR spin press statements. I wasn't just protecting Lana anymore. I was building a firewall around the truth. Before noon, I visited the sheriff's office in person. Greer, the division captain, met me in a back room. No uniform, just a tucked-in shirt and quiet eyes that had seen more politics than action in recent years. I handed over the USB drive, no ceremony. Just a name, a chain of custody, and a line drawn in silence. Greer opened a folder as I sat. He didn't offer coffee, didn't need to. "We've reviewed the preliminary licensing file from state regulators," he said. "This Civic Shield outfit, you're correct. They're not authorized. They're under administrative review for impersonation and contract fraud. We're preparing to open a formal inquiry into their operations in this district." "And the HOA?" I asked. "If your evidence holds and the interview logs match the timeline, misses. Ellings may be facing charges related to fraudulent contracting, budget, misappropriation, and negligent endangerment. Possibly more, depending on what your recordings show. She's not just power-hungry," I said. "She's dangerous." Greer nodded slowly. "We're watching carefully. If anything escalates, we step in." That was enough for now. By early afternoon, I met Darren at the community pool gates. He looked better than usual, creased khakis replaced by dark slacks, button down instead of his usual logo polo. A man ready to step out of someone else's shadow. We walked together through the side trail, the shortcut behind the playground, where kids once played before Patricia's quiet zones forced their families elsewhere. A reminder of what silence had already cost this place. At home, Lana printed a finalized copy of every supporting document and tucked it into a navy binder. She'd designed the cover herself. No title, just the outline of a service dog paw fading into a flag. She handed it to me without a word. At 4 p.m., I got the text from Elena. Final interview with HOA counsel confirmed. Her piece was scheduled to run the next morning, front page of the local section. She didn't give me the headline. She didn't need to. All the pieces were in position now. I took one last walk around the block as the sun fell behind the rooftops, the sky bleeding orange and violet. Neighbors nodded as I passed. Some stayed on their porches. Others offered no more than eye contact. But something in their posture had changed. No more turning away. No more pretending the lawn wasn't on fire. At 6:52 p.m., we stepped into the Cedar Ridge clubhouse. It looked the same as always: cheap carpet, plastic chairs in orderly rows, water coolers with dusty paper cones. But tonight, the air felt different, thicker, charged. People showed up early, seats filled quickly. Even residents who hadn't attended a meeting in years drifted in like they didn't know why, only that they needed to be there. Patricia arrived at 7:02, fashionably late by her own rules. She wore navy-like armor, pearls like command stripes. She didn't look at me, didn't look at Darren, just walked straight to the front with her folder and her false confidence. She had no idea what was waiting for her. I sat in the second row, Lana beside me, Darren one row behind. Elena sat near the back with a quiet recorder, watching. When Patricia called the meeting to order, she wore her usual smile, but it wouldn't survive the next hour. Patricia opened with budget updates. She always did. Monotone, precise, carefully curated to sound important enough that no one would question her. Landscaping adjustments, seasonal decor expenditures, a maintenance proposal for repainting community mailboxes in approved neutral tones. It was a slow play, a way of setting the rhythm, calm the room, remind everyone that she ran this place. But something was off tonight. The room was too full, faces she didn't recognize, people who never came. To meetings, sat upright, silent. Not hostile, just attentive. And Patricia wasn't used to that. She thrived on apathy. But tonight, apathy had vacated the chairs. She faltered when she reached the next item. Security protocols and emergency readiness. This pertains to recent misunderstandings involving third-party support during a neighborhood welfare check, she began. The board exercised its discretion. Correction, Darren said loudly from the back. The board was never consulted. The silence cracked. Patricia stiffened, papers fluttering slightly in her hand. She didn't look at him. Mr. Kellerman will maintain decorum. You violated board protocol, he said, standing now. You redirected budget funds without approval, hired an unlicensed security firm, and concealed their expired state certification from the rest of us. A murmur rippled through the room. Patricia's voice sharpened. That's an internal matter. No, Darren said. It's a community matter. He stepped forward, calm, holding a single page, his signed statement. He placed it on the table in front of Patricia, then turned to face the crowd. I've served on this board for 4 years. I've never spoken out because I told myself the small injustices were worth the order they preserved. But this, what happened to the Monroes, was not order. It was a targeted act under the pretense of enforcement. And it could have ended with someone dead. Someone in the back gasped. Another whispered, She really sent those men? I stood. She didn't just send them. She called it a welfare check, while knowing full well they weren't law enforcement. She justified it using a clause the board never approved for active use, paid them using misallocated funds, and lied about it afterward. Patricia's voice cut through the tension. This is a coordinated attack on the integrity of this community. No, I said, stepping to the front now. This is accountability. I laid the binder Lana had prepared on the center table. The projector behind me flickered on. Elena, now standing near the AV panel, had queued up a display. The screen showed Civic Shield's expired license. Then footage. The fake SWAT team approaching our home. Time-stamped, no badges, no insignia. Then the budget line changes. Finally, the audio clip. Patricia's own voice. I acted within provisional authority granted to the board, and I will do so again if I believe safety is at stake. By the end of the clip, even her staunchest supporters were shrinking in their seats. Patricia didn't speak. She stared straight ahead like this was happening to someone else. Her hands, once composed and immovable, now fidgeted at the hem of her blazer. I looked out at the room. You don't have to agree with me, I said, but you have to decide whether this is how you want your community governed. Through fear, through deception, through intimidation. Lana stood then, slow and steady. She didn't just fine us, she tried to erase me. That mural isn't just paint, it's memory, it's loss, it's survival. She made that a target, and the only reason I didn't react the way my training would have demanded is because I knew this wasn't a war zone, or at least I thought it wasn't. Her voice didn't shake. If anything, it held the room more tightly than mine had. The vote wasn't called immediately. There were rules, procedures, but people began to stand. Not all, but enough. A man with a walker, a young mother holding her daughter, an older couple near the door, and then Carol, quiet Carol, the wind chime widow. She didn't speak, but when she walked to the front of the room and placed her own violation letter on the table beside Patricia's folder, it echoed louder than anything we'd said. That night, the meeting ended without ceremony. Patricia left first, clutching her papers, avoiding every eye in the room. But the story didn't leave with her. Elena approached me afterward. It runs tomorrow, she said simply. And based on what I saw tonight, I'll be including names. I nodded. Then make sure they're spelled right. The storm that had been hanging all day finally broke as we walked home. The rain didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. The morning sun hit our front yard like it hadn't dared to. For weeks, soft, golden, guiltless. For the first time in months, I didn't check the mailbox like it might bite me. I didn't scan the windows for movement. I just opened the front door and breathed in the air like I owned it. Because now, we weren't hiding. The local paper hit driveways before 7 a.m. The headline wasn't subtle. HOA president accused of unlicensed raid, budget misuse, board member confirms abuse of power. Elena didn't pull punches. She quoted Darren directly, quoted Patricia's voice from the recording, mentioned the Civic Shield violation, and just beneath the article, a smaller story. Veterans Memorial mural targeted an HOA dispute. Wife speaks out. That headline hit differently. Lana stood in the driveway, arms folded, eyes on the paper like it might turn to ash. She didn't smile, didn't cry, but I watched her jaw shift, subtle, quiet. The kind of motion that only meant one thing in our house: acknowledgement without surrender. At 9:12 a.m., the HOA's general inbox issued a statement of concern, citing community distress and misinformation. By noon, the HOA board's emergency meeting agenda had leaked on a neighborhood app, Patricia's position listed for review. By 3 p.m., a petition to suspend her presidency had already passed the required signature threshold. But what mattered more than any of that were the knocks on our door. The first was Carol. She brought her wind chimes. "They've been boxed up too long," she said. "Time to hear them again." Lana helped her hang them. Didn't say a word. Just stood beneath the soft melody and listened until the sound folded into the wind like it belonged there. The next was a man I barely recognized. Unit 12A lived across from the community tennis court. He handed me a folder. "She fined me last year for letting my niece park in the guest slot. Said I was abusing visitor privileges. But what she didn't know was, my niece was visiting from Walter Reed. She'd lost her leg 2 months earlier. He didn't wait for me to respond, just said, 'Thanks for starting this,' and left. By sundown, neighbors we hadn't spoken to since move-in were waving from porches, stopping during their walks, dropping off cookies, flowers, even letters. No one said Patricia's name. They didn't need to. She'd become a symbol, and symbols lose their power when no one fears them anymore. Still, I wasn't letting my guard down. At 6 p.m., I got a call from Mira. "The state audit begins Monday," she said. "Your case is now part of a multi-district review. Apparently your HOA isn't the only one with creative leadership." I leaned against the porch railing. "Think it'll stick?" Between the contract fraud, impersonation, and public backlash, Mira exhaled. "I think this is just the beginning. But beginnings require groundwork." I spent the next few hours finalizing our own preparations. The last part of my plan wasn't just to expose Patricia. It was to build something after her. Most people take down bullies and walk away. But neighborhoods, they rot without structure. So I began drafting a new resolution. Open board elections with term limits, transparent budget lines, quarterly public audits, an independent appeals board for citation disputes, and a clause protecting the expression of military service, cultural heritage, and personal memorials. It wasn't just a rule book. It was a safeguard. That night, Lana and I sat beneath the mural again. It was darker now, dusk pooling in the corners of the yard, but the mural glowed faintly under the soft, reconnected lights. 2 of which I'd rewired earlier, connected to a timer set for civil twilight. "You fixed them," Lana said. "They're not out of compliance anymore," I replied. I adjusted the angle. Even ran a lux meter. She smiled, just a little. "Malicious compliance?" I shook my head. "Strategic clarity." She leaned against me then, her head resting just under my chin. "I didn't think we'd win," she said quietly. "We didn't yet," I replied. "But we're no longer losing." A soft wind passed through the yard, brushing the tall grass along the edge of the fence. The mural didn't move, but it felt alive, like the memory it carried had weight again. Lana looked up. "You know she's not going quietly." "No," I said. But for the first time, she's not the one with the loudest voice. The HOA emergency meeting was less than 24 hours away. Patricia would try to spin, to distract, to regain ground. But we weren't walking in as targets this time. We were walking in as the reason others started standing up. The clubhouse felt colder than usual. Not physically, there was no breeze, no AC blast. but in the way people spoke or didn't. Words were hushed, conversations clipped. Eye contact happened in fragments. No one wanted to admit it aloud, but everyone knew something was about to end. Patricia stood at the front, arms folded, lips tight. She hadn't brought her usual stack of folders. No glossy charts, no fresh rule drafts, just a clipboard and a tight smile stretched too thin to hold. The folding chairs were packed shoulder to shoulder, more than we'd ever seen. People standing in the back, lining the walls. A few brought their kids, sitting them quietly with tablets and snacks, as if knowing this meeting would be remembered. Darren sat at the far end of the front row, no longer hiding behind procedural silence. Elena stood near the back, recorder clipped to her sweater, notepad out. At 7:01 p.m., Patricia tapped the microphone. This emergency meeting has been convened under Article 4, Section D, following the recent disruption caused by false claims and media misrepresentation, targeting this board's efforts to maintain community safety. There were no gasps, no outbursts, just stillness. No one believed her anymore, and she knew it. "I will now open the floor for formal statements," she said, not meeting anyone's eyes. "If any member of the board wishes to speak." Darren stood. "My name is Darren Kellerman," he said. "HOA Treasurer, 4 years, Resident 6. Up until now, I've remained silent because I thought I was preserving order. I now know I was preserving corruption." A ripple ran through the crowd. "I witnessed our president act unilaterally, hire unlicensed security forces, misappropriate budget funds, and fabricate justification for enforcement actions not supported by community bylaws. I've signed a formal affidavit. I've submitted my testimony to the licensing board and to the state's attorney, and I'm here tonight to say, enough." He stepped aside, and I stood without needing to be called. "My name is Tyler Monroe. My wife and I moved here 5 months ago. We've been fined, harassed, surveilled, and, at one point, targeted by a fake SWAT team in a fabricated wellness check. My wife is a decorated veteran. The mural she painted isn't a political statement. It's a memorial." I held up the binder. "This is the full record of every violation, citation, recording, and procedural breach committed by Mrs. Ellings over the last 120 days. Every claim has been submitted to the Department of Regulatory Oversight and the local sheriff's department." I paused, letting that settle. 3 days ago, she told me over the phone that she would do so again if she believed safety was at stake. That recording is now part of a criminal inquiry. Patricia didn't look at me. She didn't interrupt. She simply adjusted the pen in her hand, waiting for her turn to try and reclaim control. "I move," Darren said suddenly, turning to the crowd, "that we vote on a motion to suspend Patricia Ellings from her duties as HOA president, effective immediately. Pending the outcome of the ongoing investigation." Patricia raised her hand sharply. "That's not how this board operates. I must be given the floor to respond." "You've had the floor for years," Carol said from the third row. She stood slowly, wind chime earrings clinking softly in the silence. "I was told my husband's memorial chimes were a nuisance, that they disturbed the community. I believed it. I took them down. I didn't know until recently that I was one of dozens targeted for being different, inconvenient, or grieving in the wrong way." Another neighbor rose, a father who'd been fined for hosting his autistic son's birthday party in the community lawn without a permit. Another woman who'd been cited for a potted plant placed 1 inch too far from her steps. Stories poured out like breath finally released. People didn't shout, they just spoke. And Patricia, for the first time in a long time, had no procedural rule to hide behind. Her silence wasn't strategic, it was brittle. The vote was raised by show of hands. All 5 remaining board members stood and raised theirs. Patricia didn't, but she didn't try to stop them either. When the tally was done, the room didn't cheer. No applause, just a quiet communal exhale. Patricia gathered her clipboard, turned without a word, and walked out the side exit. No farewell, no acknowledgement, no ceremony. After the meeting, Lana and I stepped outside. The night was cool, the air sharp with possibility. Neighbors we didn't even know by name nodded, smiled. One woman slipped a note into Lana's hand. Just 3 words, handwritten. "Thank you both." We stood by the mural under the glow of the reconnected lights. The 3 badges shimmered slightly in the amber wash. Lana ran her fingers over the newest one. "You think she'll try to come back?" "She might," I said, "but next time she won't be met with silence." Because now the neighborhood had a voice. The new board met on a Tuesday. No podium, no speeches, just folding chairs in a circle and coffee in paper cups, passed without hierarchy. Darren sat beside Carol. 2 younger residents volunteered to help revise the bylaw language. And Lana? She was offered a position as community outreach chair. She said no. Not because she didn't care, but because some victories aren't about leadership. Some are about preservation. She chose to serve in a quieter way, mentoring others who had also been targeted, helping them fight citations, prepare appeals, and, when necessary, tell their stories. The mural stayed, untouched, unchallenged, unbreakable. 3 days after the vote, we came home to find a letter tucked in our front gate. No envelope, just one folded sheet of printer paper with Patricia's name at the bottom. Not a return, not a threat, just a single sentence. I never thought anyone would stand up this long. There was no apology, but maybe that was its own kind of confession. We didn't reply. By week's end, the state had officially suspended Civic Shield's operations, pending further investigation. The sheriff's department filed an internal review, and Patricia's personal bank transactions, thanks to an anonymous submission from a board member, were now part of a civil inquiry. No one saw her again after that. Her house went dark. A for sale sign appeared in the lawn within the month. Lana and I reclaimed the front yard inch by inch. She planted lavender under the mural, the kind that blooms in quiet defiance. I fixed the cracked section of our walkway with a patch of stone from her hometown in Colorado. It didn't match. We left it that way on purpose. Some things should stand out. The new board passed our drafted amendments unanimously. From now on, citations required time-stamped evidence and a second signature. Memorial displays tied to verified service could not be challenged without due process. And most importantly, any contracted third-party firm had to be licensed, bonded, and voted on in open meeting. We didn't erase what happened. We legislated against it happening again. The community changed slowly but visibly. The wind chimes came back. A disabled veteran hung a handmade wooden eagle over his garage, where a blank wall had stood for years out of fear. And the family who once stopped walking their dog past our house because they were afraid of conflict stopped to pet Lana's retriever every evening, like it was a ritual. We found ourselves talking more, listening more, laughing sometimes. It felt like breathing without weight. I kept the binder, the receipts, the recordings, not out of spite, but as record. A quiet monument to what happens when everyday people decide that fear isn't a valid form of governance. And in the middle of it all, the mural endured. It faded a bit with the seasons, got weathered on the edges, but we never repainted. The chips in the paint told their own truth. I used to think strength was about standing alone. Now I know it's about standing long enough that others can stand with you. We never meant to lead a revolt. We just refused to be erased. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. This isn't the end of the fight. It's proof that the quiet ones can roar when they're cornered.